Senator Murphy, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you so much for being one of the only people, I don't want to say freaking out because it's a rightful freaking out over just the nonstop crypto corruption in Donald Trump's administration. And you've talked about how they're doing this publicly because they then think that, oh, if we do it out in the open, no one's really going to care. But they're also doing it with the form of corruption that people don't really understand in crypto. You clearly do. You're fighting back against it with the Meme Act. Can you talk more about that and just what is happening in this administration full of criminals?
Yeah, I mean, this is bananas, and I mean, I am freaked out about it, but I'm just furious because Trump is trying to do something pretty simple. He's trying to do all of his corruption publicly, so that people will sort of think to themselves, well, if it was illegal or unethical, he wouldn't be doing it publicly. But just because it's all out in the open doesn't mean that it's any less corrupt than the shit that corrupt governors and mayors used to do behind closed doors. What he's doing is just getting bribed. He's getting paid. And it's a bigger deal than your sort of everyday garden variety bribery, because it's not thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's billions
Yeah.
of dollars. So he's got these two crypto scams. He's got a meme coin, and that meme coin is minting him hundreds of millions of dollars because he gets money when he issues the coin, but then he gets money off of every transaction. And he's literally using the White House to drive up the price. He's saying, for the people that buy the meme coin, I'll give you special access to the White House. If a mayor was doing that, like if a mayor was like offering meetings at the White House, meetings at City Hall for $1,000, he would be run out of town on a rail. But for some reason, it's okay when Trump does it. And then he's got this stable coin. Stable coin's a little bit different, because it's not as volatile. But he just cut a deal with a foreign government, the United Arab Emirates, in which this foreign government said they would conduct a really massive business deal in Trump's stable coin. And so in that case, Trump just kind of acts like a bank. He gets to take the $2 billion, invest it, make money off of it, again, hundreds of millions of
Mhm.
dollars, um, uh, as just basically a form of tribute from a foreign government. And of course, that foreign government wants something from Trump. And he announced like 2 days after the stablecoin scam was made public that he was going to give the United Arab Emirates what they wanted, this sort of special access to US semiconductors. So it's just stunningly corrupt. It's literally hundreds of millions of dollars that are being sent directly to the pockets of Trump and his family members. It's unconstitutional, no doubt about it. And I think it's really important that we raise the temperature, because maybe we'll get a couple of Republicans to join us at some point on an amendment or a piece of legislation that puts an end to some or all of this.
And some of your colleagues in the Republican caucus are starting to come around on some of the corruption and speak out against it. I don't know how Rand Paul has become a hero of the resistance, but now he's speaking out. I just saw Ted Cruz on CNBC. But if they don't, if they are as spineless as we expect them to be, come 2027, when we have hopefully a Senate majority, what is the first thing that we're going to be doing to make sure that all of this corruption is not just brought to the public, but Donald Trump faces some sort of accountability for it?
So, well, it is definitely unconstitutional. It is true that there are a whole bunch of ethics statutes that curiously exempt the president of the United States. I don't
Mm.
really understand why that is, but apparently, way back in the 1990s, when we redid our ethics statute, the president was cut out. So, the first thing we will do if we win back power is pass legislation to make it absolutely clear that it is both unconstitutional and statutorily illegal. And we would deny money to the White House, to the State Department, if the president was violating the law and carrying out foreign policy, for instance, in a corrupt way, like he is right now, accepting planes and crypto investments from foreign governments in exchange for favors. We've got to make that really clear to the American people, because, I mean, Jack, you understand this. The Democrats are not super trusted either on this issue of corruption, right? Because people think that we're all on the take. That's not true. That's not
Yeah.
true. But we need to say, if you give us power, here are the 6 things that we're going to do to unrig government, to clean up government, and hold accountable people like Donald Trump who are padding their pockets off of their federal office.
And I want to get into what we're gonna do, but I just need to take a moment to just kind of crash out and lose my mind over the plane that you
Go for it.
mentioned. I don't know how this is being reported. First, as a gift to the government, it's not. But then is something transferred to Trump's library, like it's going to sit there, like it does with Reagan or other presidents. I don't know why the dots haven't been connected. That all the lawsuits that Trump is settling with his intimidation are being paid out to his library. So it's just another way for corporations to write off their gifts to Trump at the same time as he can use it and abuse it however he wants. Like what the fuck? Like what how do we I don't really know what to say. I just kind of want to put a quarter in the machine and let you ran on this because I just lost my mind at this point.
Well,
What is happening?
yeah, what's it? Well, and also like we try to put Trump into this conventional box, right? We
Hmm.
try to sort of think that anything he does exists in the set of rules that exists, including his presidential library. His presidential library is not going to be a not-for-profit endeavor. His
Thank you.
presidential library is just going to be another mechanism by which he and his family make money personally. So, how is it okay that the jet eventually ends up in the library when the library is just going to be
That that's
another
that's the
for-profit venture of the
worst
true
part.
universe? And by the way, the library doesn't normally get built for 20 years. And so during that, and Trump will be dead when his library is built. So during that time, he gets the jet. So the jet is going directly to Trump to be able for him to ferry all of his Mar-a-Lago friends around. I mean, it's just absolutely wild. Listen, hopefully the Qataris will have some sense and they will pull the plug on this. They're not going to pull the plug
Do
on
you
it
really think they
while
will,
he's over there.
or are they just happy to do this? Like, what would be the incentive to that? It just appears so crazy. Can't Trump just ask Pete Hegseth to put away a couple of GNTs and like change the news cycle so people forget? Like, what is their incentive not to do this? That's what I
Yeah.
keep struggling with. Is like, what is the incentive of this administration that is so public in their corruption to not just keep it going?
Well, listen, I mean, eventually there'll be some legal liability here. I
Yes.
mean, Trump's DOJ is not going to hold people accountable, but if this is illegal and the statute of limitations is still open and available, a future DOJ can hold people accountable for illegal behavior. But for these foreign governments, listen, they could make a bet that Trump is going to rig the rules of democracy and no one will ever rule America besides the Trump family. But that's still, I think, unlikely. We are going to protect American democracy, and that means probably in the next 5 years, there's going to be a Democrat in the White House running American foreign policy. And what we are saying to the Qataris and the Emiratis and the Saudis is that, listen, if this is how you're going to conduct business, there's a price to be paid, right? We don't want to be in business with countries that are engaged in open, outright graft and bribery. And so, the Qataris will have to think whether this is going to damage their long-term relationship with the United States, playing by Trump's rules, paying him off to get some, benefit in the short run. And so we're going to have a vote on the Senate floor. I've said this that I'm not going to approve any arms deal to Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia
Yeah.
without a vote in the Senate, without a debate in the Senate, and that'll be an embarrassing debate for those countries. So hopefully, at the very least, Qatar, who I do think pays a little bit more attention to public opinion in the United States than the UAE and the Saudis do, will make a different decision here.
Well, we really do need to be not just like having foreign governments pay attention to the public opinion. We really have to be focused on it as well. You've been going across the country doing town halls at the same time as you've been calling out, the incompetence of this administration. But, I think about the Russ Vought quote that just always lives in my head of I want federal workers to feel traumatized when they come into the office. But that's how this administration wants America to feel. Christy Noam isn't just trying to break Homeland Security because she's incompetent. We don't just see Pam Bondi touting what did she say? President Trump, you've saved 270 million lives, dear leader. They're not just acting like idiots because it's what they do. It's because they want us to distrust government. How do we going forward communicate that government still works and that come, when a Democrat is in the White House, hopefully soon, that we can fix things, that we can make government work? How do we give people the hope that these things aren't broken like Donald Trump and Elon wants us to think that they are?
Yeah, this is back to earlier conversation we are having. So, Jack, when I started out in politics, 25 years ago, campaign finance reform, unrigging the rules of democracy, was a top 2 or 3 issue for the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, is it top 10? I don't know. It's kind of sort of fallen off since the Citizens United decision. Maybe it's just that Democrats sort of thought that it was hopeless and that because of the Supreme Court's disposition and loving corporate money, we should just give up. What Democrats need to do right now is make it clear that if you give us power, we are going to act boldly and immediately to
Yeah.
unrig government. If we need to pass a constitutional amendment to get corporate and billionaire money and secret money out of politics, then we will make it our mission to pass a constitutional amendment. We will pass the Stock Act. We will ban every member of Congress from being able to trade stocks. We'll shut down the revolving door where lobbyists and legislators and staff just cycle back and forth so that the lobbyists have more power than ordinary Americans. We'll clean up those ethics laws to make sure that it applies to everybody. Democrats are going to have to run really loudly on a very specific plan to unrig government. And if we do, then it makes our complaints, our very legitimate complaints about Trump's corruption, much more credible, because people will see us as not just complaining about it, but being willing to do something about it. And Americans will be willing to trust democracy again only if they see it be unrigged. Like right now, Americans don't trust democracy because they've watched it enrich the powerful and the corporations, frankly, when Republicans and Democrats were in charge. So if we don't start getting serious about that message, then folks are not going to believe us when we say, put us in charge and we'll make government work for you instead of the powerful.
Yeah, and they're only going to believe us if we're actually fighting, which you have been maybe more than any other Democrat in Congress, and it's very much reflected in how excited people are to engage with your town halls, your social content. I think you had one of your biggest fundraising quarters ever.
Crazy.
But you're talking about not just fighting, but like you just said, we need a different view of how we do government. I remember it was a couple months ago when you were on the Daily Show, you were talking to Jon Stewart about how our party's idea of combating what's wrong in the country is an addiction to maybe writing checks, fixing things around the edges. You didn't talk about that as a bad thing necessarily, but not entirely the right solution. Could you expand more upon that? Because it's just been something bouncing around in my head lately. We need a different view of the Democratic Party. We need to change our branding. What's the Senator Murphy branding change that we're doing going forward?
Yeah, I appreciate you talking about this. Listen, I think the Democratic Party has done a really bad job of understanding the real emotional state of the country, the spiritual state of the country. We're in a real spiritual crisis in this country. I don't mean that in a religious sense, right? I just mean that there are a whole shitload of Americans who are waking up every day without a sense of meaning and purpose in life. And that's in large part because they don't feel like they have control. They feel like they're out of control of their lives. And so we don't really understand that Republicans tailor policies to deliver control. All right. What is the obsession over the border about? It's about taking control of the border. What's the tariffs about? It's about taking control of imports and exports. Why were they so obsessive about getting rid of mask mandates and vaccine mandates, even when vaccines and masks polled pretty well?
Yeah.
It was about control, giving people back control. So here's my critique. The child care tax credit, the forgiveness of student loans, the supersized Obamacare tax credits, those are all good policy, no doubt. Like they saved a lot of lives, rescued a lot of people from poverty, but they kind of didn't work politically because it looked like we were just writing people checks to paper over the fact that the economy is unfair. What people really want is for work to pay. They want to be able to work and for it to afford for them a dignified living. In fact, most families would like for one job to be able to pay enough so that a family of 4 could survive, that one parent could choose to stay home if they wanted. They want to be able to start a small business in their community and not have it be stamped out of existence within weeks by one of these monopolies. And so that's what Democrats have to start talking about. That's why increasing the minimum wage, breaking up consolidated corporate power, eliminating unfair employment practices like non-compete agreements. That should be the centerpiece of Democratic economic messaging because that's about control. That's not writing you a check and say, hey, I'm sorry the economy is rigged, but I'll just give you a little bit of money.
So sorry that work doesn't work for you. It's like, I know you're fighting for.
Let's make work pay. Let's bring dignity to work again. That's our message. It'll speak emotionally to the country in a way that unfortunately a lot of the Republican message does.
And especially with my younger generation, especially younger guys, my friends graduating school right now, a lot of them worried about whether the job offers that they were given that they start in, June, July, September are still going to be there. Some of them having them taken away. They're feeling that anxiety. I'm sure they want to turn to some control. On that note, though, I want to close with this. What are you doing right now, like to just fucking relax? Like, is it a throwback to young Chris Murphy? Was young Chris Murphy at UConn like just after a law exam, just firing off a couple of like American spirits? Are you zen now? Like, what are you doing? Like, what's the relax? What's the what's the vice? What are you doing to just like
Yeah,
kick back? I'm done.
I'm pretty good about unplugging, and it's a long list. So I run normally late at night, kind of to clear my head from the day. I'm a crazy sports fan, so I was up all night tearing my hair out over the Celtics blowing another lead to the Knicks. I'm a fantasy sports guy, so I'm
Wait, are you a
tracking my.
Celtics fan?
I'm a Celtics fan, so I'm a weird amalgamation of New York and Boston. I'm Celtics, Red Sox, but the
Okay, let's wrap it
football
up.
giants.
Let's
Fantasy
wrap.
baseball guy, so my fantasy baseball team is competitive this year in my 20-year league with friends. And then I'm a sports dad, so I've got two teenagers, one of which travels the East Coast playing hockey, and so I shepherd him all around and care way too much about the quality of 14-year-old youth hockey on the East Coast. So I don't know. That's a pretty I mean that's a pretty long list of things that distract me pretty nicely from the occasional horrors of this job.
Yeah, and with the Celtics in mind, what was worse, listening to Christy Noam speak or watching Tatum last night, which was more painful?
Oh, 100% Christina.
Well, hopefully you don't have to deal with either any more Celtics injuries or much more Christy Noam. Senator Murphy, I appreciate you taking the time, man. Thank you so
Thanks, man.
much.
Take care.